Stay silent. Everything will come to you naturally. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by telling you a story. A few years ago, I was having coffee with a friend, an incredibly talented young entrepreneur. Smart, driven, articulate, but he was frustrated. He was doing everything right, networking, pitching, building, yet nothing seemed to be falling into place. He leaned over and asked me, "Simon, what am I doing wrong?" I looked at him and I said, "Maybe you're trying too hard." He looked confused, so I told him what I'll tell you now. Sometimes the best thing we can do is stay silent, let go, trust. Now let me be clear. I'm not talking about giving up. I'm not talking about doing nothing. I'm talking about the kind of silence that gives space for something greater to emerge. You see, we live in a world that worships hustle. If you're not grinding, you're falling behind. If you're not speaking up, you're not being seen. We push, we chase, we force, and in the process we forget one simple truth. Nature doesn't hustle, yet everything gets done. Look at the seasons. Spring never races to beat winter. The tide never argues with the moon. The sun doesn't scream to be noticed, and yet the flowers still bloom, the ocean still moves, and the world still turns. What if life works the same way? What if the clarity you're searching for isn't found in the noise, but in the quiet? What if the answers you're chasing are waiting, not to be demanded, but to be received? Some of the greatest leaders I've ever met are not the loudest in the room, they're the most centered. They don't speak to impress. They speak when they know they have something to say. They're not silent because they're weak. They're silent because they're wise. Silence isn't the absence of action, it's the presence of trust. In a world driven by noise, notifications, opinions, deadlines, expectations, it's easy to mistake movement for progress and volume for value. We're constantly consuming, reacting, speaking, doing. There's a sense of urgency embedded into how we live. If you're not saying something, you're being left behind. If you're not responding, you're falling behind. If you're not on, you're off the radar. But here's the paradox. Some of the most important breakthroughs in life don't come when we're talking, but when we're quiet. Real clarity doesn't arrive during the storm. It comes in the stillness afterward. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of something deeper. It's a doorway to insight, a canvas for reflection. When we stay silent, we create space, not just around us, but within us. And in that space, we begin to hear the voice we often ignore, our own. There's a reason so many great thinkers, creators, and leaders throughout history valued solitude. It wasn't because they wanted to be antisocial or disengaged. It's because they understood that wisdom often whispers. It doesn't shout. And if we're too busy filling every gap with sound, we'll miss it. Think about your own life. Have you ever had a moment of sudden insight in the shower? Or while walking alone, or lying in bed at night? Those flashes of understanding don't happen when you're knee deep in noise. They come when your mind has the freedom to roam, to wander, to breathe. We live in a culture obsessed with speed. But clarity isn't fast, it's not loud, and it's rarely convenient. It doesn't show up when we demand it. It arrives when we're ready to receive it. Silence creates the condition for that readiness. The problem is, we often fear silence. We equate it with emptiness, with boredom, with being unproductive. So we fill the quiet with more noise, scrolling, talking, planning, explaining. But in doing so, we drown out our own voice. We miss the opportunity to truly connect with ourselves. When we embrace silence, not as a void but as a powerful tool, we begin to notice things, we see patterns, we feel what we've been suppressing. We start asking better questions, not just what should I do, but why do I feel this way? What truly matters to me? Am I chasing something that even aligns with who I am? Clarity doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from listening better. And to listen well, we have to slow down. We have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing for a while. That space, that silence, isn't something to rush through. It's something to honor. Some of the most profound transformations begin with a pause, a moment of stillness, a decision to turn inward instead of outward. It's in that moment that we reconnect with our center, with what Simon Sinek might call our why. Because until we understand why we're doing something, the how and the what won't really matter. In silence, we remember who we are beneath all the roles, all the noise, all the pressure. We get back in touch with our values, our vision, and our voice. And once we're aligned with that inner clarity, our actions become more intentional, our words more impactful, and our presence more powerful. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain, don't rush to fix it. Don't fill the space with more noise. Instead, be still, be quiet. Trust that what you need to know is already within you, waiting to surface. Silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. You just have to make space to hear them. We live in a culture that celebrates control. We like to plan, organize, optimize. We map out the next 5 years. We set goals, make lists, calculate outcomes. We believe that if we just try hard enough, push hard enough, or stay ahead of the curve, we can force things to happen on our timeline. But the truth is, life doesn't always operate on our schedule. And most of the time, the more we try to control every outcome, the more resistance we create. The irony is, some of the most important things in life, growth, healing, inspiration, connection, don't respond well to pressure. They unfold on their own terms in their own time. That's why learning to trust the natural process is not a weakness. It's a strength. It's an act of wisdom. Look at nature. You don't plant a seed and then yank it out of the soil every day to see if it's growing. You water it, you give it sunlight, you protect it, and then you wait, because growth by its very nature is invisible until it isn't. Something is always happening below the surface, even when you can't see it. The same is true for your life, the work you're doing, the quiet effort, the small improvements, the mindset shifts. They may not show immediate results, but that doesn't mean they aren't working. Just because something isn't visible doesn't mean it isn't valuable. But here's where most people get stuck. When they don't see quick progress, they start to doubt the process. They panic. They pivot too soon. They abandon the path because they confuse slowness with failure. But trusting the natural process means having the patience to stay the course, even when it looks like nothing is happening. It means believing that life has its own rhythm, and our job is to align with it, not control it. You can't rush meaningful things, you can't rush love, you can't rush mastery, you can't rush self-discovery. These things take time, they take presence, they take trust. Sometimes the very thing you're chasing is already on its way to you, but you won't see it if you keep running in the opposite direction. You have to slow down, you have to give it space to arrive. That's what trust looks like. There's a moment in everyone's journey when they feel like quitting, like nothing is working, but that moment usually comes right before the breakthrough, not because the universe is testing you, but because all real change happens below the surface first. Before the results come, the mindset has to shift. The character has to be built. The lessons have to be learned. Trusting the process isn't passive. It doesn't mean you sit back and wait for life to hand you everything. It means you do your part, and then you allow, you stay grounded, you stay open, you keep showing up even if the payoff isn't immediate, and maybe most importantly, you stop comparing your journey to everyone else's. Because their timeline isn't your timeline, their path isn't your path, what's right for them may not be right for you, and that's okay. What matters is that you're growing, that you're learning, that you're becoming the kind of person who can receive what you're asking for. Because sometimes it's not the thing that needs to be ready, it's you. So if you're in a season where things feel slow, where the outcomes aren't matching the effort, pause, breathe, and remind yourself that the process is working, even if you can't see it yet. You are not behind, you are not failing, you are in the middle of becoming. Trust the timing, trust the unfolding, trust the process. There's a common misconception in today's world that the loudest person in the room is the one who holds the most power. That speaking up the most means you're leading, that constant visibility equals constant progress. But real strength, real leadership, and real impact don't always come with a megaphone. Sometimes they show up quietly, intentionally, calmly. Not all action is loud. In fact, some of the most powerful actions are completely silent. The decision to walk away from a toxic situation, the choice to hold your tongue in a heated conversation, the discipline to stay consistent when no one is watching, the courage to keep building something, even when you're not getting applause. These moments don't make headlines, they don't trend, but they shape who you are at the core. We've become addicted to noise. Social media amplifies this by rewarding volume, likes, shares, comments, visibility. We're told that if we're not constantly showing up online, we're falling behind, that if we're not on all the time, we're missing out. And so, people start to confuse motion with meaning. They assume that more noise means more progress. But let's take a step back. Think about the most respected leaders, mentors, or even friends you've known in your life. Were they the ones always talking, always demanding attention, or were they the ones who listened first, who thought before they spoke, who acted with quiet conviction? True leadership isn't about domination, it's about presence. And presence doesn't require noise. There's power in being the calmest person in the room, in being able to observe before reacting, in being secure enough not to prove yourself constantly. This kind of quiet confidence is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. People often mistake quietness for weakness, but in reality, it takes far more strength to remain composed in a chaotic world than to react impulsively to everything around you. It's easy to raise your voice, it's harder to raise your awareness. Silence can be a form of strategy. Consider a chess game. Every move is calculated, intentional, quiet. The best players aren't the loudest. They're the ones thinking 3 steps ahead. The same is true in life. When you learn to act with intention rather than reaction, your actions carry more weight. They become more meaningful. This doesn't mean we should never speak up or never be visible. Of course not. There are moments when our voice is needed, when speaking out is the right move, but we should never equate constant speaking with constant value. Sometimes, the most important message you can deliver is delivered by your actions, not your words. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop trying to be loud, you start becoming more authentic. You stop performing. You start aligning. You begin to move from a place of clarity rather than pressure. Your actions become rooted in purpose instead of validation. There's a quiet kind of greatness that doesn't seek recognition but earns it anyway. A strength that doesn't yell but is felt. And in a noisy world, that kind of stillness is rare and powerful. So if you're someone who doesn't feel naturally loud or constantly visible, don't see that as a weakness. See it as a gift. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to constantly prove your worth to be valuable. You just need to know who you are, stay grounded in your values, move with intention, and trust that your presence, your energy, and your quiet consistency will speak louder than any shout ever could. Not all action is loud, and sometimes the most powerful action is the one taken in silence, with confidence, and without the need for applause. There's something deeply human about wanting to control outcomes. We want guarantees. We want certainty. We want things to go exactly the way we envisioned them, on the timeline we imagined. So we do everything we can. We plan, prepare, work hard, and give it our all. And that's good. That's necessary. Taking responsibility for your effort is powerful. But here's the truth most of us struggle to accept. At some point, you have to let go. Because no matter how hard you work, how perfect your strategy is, or how deeply you care, there are things that will always be outside of your control, the timing, the reactions of others, the opportunities that appear or don't. And if you try to control every detail, every variable, every possible outcome, you'll burn out. Not because you didn't try hard enough, but because you didn't release. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing the boundary between effort and surrender. You do your part, you show up fully, and then you step back and allow life to take over. That space between doing and receiving is where peace lives. Most people live in a loop of over-efforting. They do the work, and then obsess about the outcome. They replay conversations, refresh the email inbox, analyze how they could have said it differently. They keep tweaking, fixing, pushing. But here's the thing. Constantly regripping something you've already handled doesn't improve it. It only drains you. There's wisdom in knowing when enough is enough. Think of an artist painting a portrait. There's a moment where one more stroke would ruin the piece. The art lies not just in creation, but in the ability to stop at the right time. The same is true with life. Knowing when to step back is just as important as knowing when to lean in. When you let go after doing your part, you create space for other forces to move, for timing to align, for the unseen to support you. Sometimes the break, through your waiting for, only arrives when you stop forcing it and allow things to unfold naturally. Letting go also builds trust. Trust in yourself, in your process, in something bigger than you. And that trust makes you resilient. Because when things don't go exactly as planned, you're not shaken. You know you've done what you can. You're at peace with it. You've released the outcome, and with that, you've freed yourself from unnecessary stress. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become wiser with your energy. You learn to invest effort without attachment. You give your best, your time, focus, heart. And then you rest in the understanding that what's meant to come will come. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's not easy to wait. It's not easy to sit in uncertainty. But growth often happens in that exact space. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. You water it. You wait. You trust that the roots are forming beneath the surface. In many ways, surrender is the final, most powerful step of action. It's not the absence of strength. It's the presence of wisdom. It's saying, I've done what I can. Now I trust the process. So if you're at a point where you've poured your energy into something, be it a goal, a relationship, a dream, know this: you don't have to carry it forever. You don't have to control the outcome. You just have to show up with intention, give it your best, and then let go. And in that letting go, you might just discover that what's meant for you has been trying to find its way to you all along. There's a common narrative in our society that equates silence with submission, passivity, or even fear. We're conditioned to believe that the strongest people are the loudest, the ones who speak up first, dominate the conversation, and make their presence known through volume and certainty. But the truth is, silence, when it's intentional, is one of the most powerful forms of strength. It takes strength to stay quiet when your ego wants to shout. When you're misunderstood, misjudged, or even provoked, it's easy to lash out, to defend yourself, to react. But choosing silence in that moment, that requires composure. It demands emotional discipline, and that kind of restraint is a sign of inner power, not weakness. Anyone can react, but very few can reflect before they respond. Silence gives you that space. It allows you to feel the emotion without being controlled by it. It gives you the clarity to choose your response instead of just giving in to the first impulse. Think about it. When someone raises their voice in anger, it's often a sign that they feel out of control. They're trying to dominate the room because deep down they're insecure or uncertain. But when someone is truly secure in themselves, they don't need to prove it to anyone. They don't need to be loud to be heard. That's the kind of silence that speaks volumes. You'll notice it in the way a calm person can shift the energy of a room simply by walking in. They don't have to say much. Their energy does the talking. Their silence commands attention, not because it's empty, but because it's full of grounded presence. This kind of silence comes from knowing who you are. It comes from not needing constant validation. It comes from being deeply connected to your values and your inner world. And when you carry that kind of self-awareness, you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to everyone. You know your worth. You trust your path. You speak when it matters, and you remain silent when it doesn't. Now, that's not to say silence is always the answer. There are times when speaking up is necessary, courageous, and powerful. But what matters is why and how you speak. When your silence is intentional, when it comes from strength rather than fear, it becomes a tool, a way to maintain peace, hold boundaries, and protect your energy. Silence also has another incredible quality. It invites observation. When you're not filling the air with noise, you can actually see what's going on around you. You become a better listener. You start to notice body language, energy shifts, what's being said, and what's being avoided. You gain insight not just into others, but into yourself. And in a world that's constantly trying to distract us, being able to observe instead of react is a superpower. People often underestimate those who don't say much. But those are often the ones thinking the most, feeling the most, understanding the most. Silence doesn't mean absence. It often means presence. Full, intentional, aware presence. In the quiet, you develop your resilience. In the stillness, you build your character, and in the silence, you find your strength. So the next time you feel pressure to speak just to be seen, or to respond just to defend yourself, pause. Consider the power of saying nothing at all. Not because you're afraid, but because you've evolved beyond the need to prove yourself. There's a strength in silence that the noise will never understand. Hold it, honor it, trust it, and let it remind you. You don't have to be loud to be strong. Sometimes silence is the loudest message you can send. In a world that is constantly moving, buzzing, scrolling, rushing, it can feel unnatural, even uncomfortable to be still. We're taught that if we want something, we have to chase it, run after it, hustle harder, be louder, move faster. And while there's value in ambition and drive, there's also a quieter truth that often goes overlooked. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop. Pause, be still, because stillness isn't stagnation, it's alignment. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things from the right place. It's about moving from purpose, not panic, from intention, not desperation. When you are still, you stop chasing things that don't belong to you, and you begin attracting the things that do. There's a kind of energy we give off when we're grounded, centered, and calm. People can feel it, opportunities can feel it, life itself responds to it. In stillness, you stop creating resistance. You stop forcing outcomes. You begin to trust that what's meant for you will recognize you, not when you're frantically running around, but when you're standing in your truth. When you're constantly moving, striving, fixing, pushing, there's a message underneath that energy. I'm not enough unless I'm doing something. That kind of energy repels. It's built on lack, on fear, on the assumption that you must earn everything through force. But when you learn to be still, to be present and at peace with where you are, that energy shifts. You start to radiate self-trust, and in that space, things begin to flow more naturally to you. Have you ever noticed that the best ideas come to you in the shower, or during a quiet walk, or just as you're falling asleep? That's not a coincidence. It's because in stillness, your mind relaxes, your heart opens, and your intuition finally has room to speak. The answers you were chasing come to you, not because you forced them, but because you created the space for them to arrive. This applies to relationships too. When you stop trying to prove your worth to people, the right ones are drawn to you effortlessly. Why? Because stillness reflects self-assurance. It says, I'm not going to chase what isn't aligned, I'm going to attract what is. And the truth is, the right people, the right opportunities, the right timing, they never require you to become someone you're not. They find you when you're rooted in who you are. Stillness is also where you remember what you truly want. It's easy to get swept up in trends, comparisons, external pressure, but when you slow down, the noise fades, and your real desires become clear. You stop reacting and start choosing. You stop chasing illusions and start aligning with your truth. This doesn't mean life will suddenly become effortless. Stillness doesn't eliminate challenges. It simply changes how you face them. Instead of reacting from anxiety, you respond from wisdom. Instead of trying to control everything, you learn to trust the unfolding. That doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Stillness is an act of self-respect. It says, I don't need to run myself into the ground to prove my value. I trust that I'm enough as I am, and I trust that what's meant for me will come when it's meant to. That level of self-trust creates a magnetic field around you. It draws the right things in, not out of desperation, but out of resonance. So if life feels chaotic, if you feel like you're chasing and nothing is landing, try stillness. Try trusting. Let go of the pressure to constantly do and reconnect with simply being. Because sometimes, the moment you stop chasing is the moment everything starts arriving.